Welcome to Marin Voices and Views with Lawrence A. Strick. I'm Peter B. Collins. In our second segment today, we're going to talk with Joe O'Herir, CEO of the Whistlestop Senior Center in San Rafael.
Peter, remarkably, this is the beginning of our 6th year. They haven't thrown us out of here yet. And we have Damon Connolly with us.
He's back.
He's back. Damon was a guest on our very first show.
Right.
Not only that, he holds the record. This is really a record. This is like baseball home run record of being the most frequent guest on Marin Voices and Views. And we welcome you back.
Honored and good to see you guys still alive and kicking after 6 seasons.
Well, that's true. And you've changed your gig too.
Yes.
You've gone from the Dixie School District, taking you way back now, San Rafael City Council, and you just finished your first year as a Marin County Supervisor. So tell us, you like your new job or what's going on?
I love it. And in fact, it's been 10 months. And first of all, let me just say again, I'm honored to have the job. I appreciate the voters giving me the opportunity. It's been great. As I suspected, this is really a level of government where you can get tangible things done for the community, and that's been the case. Of course, you have to always recognize change doesn't happen overnight. But it is an opportunity, I think, to really get some good things done. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Now, you've jumped right in and rolled up your sleeves, and you've partnered with Judy Arnold, supervisor from Novato. And over the last 6 months, you've held public hearings, and you've worked to draft reasonable regulations to permit medical marijuana dispensaries to operate in Marin. And this is a balancing act. You've got all these competing interests to enable access for something that voters approved in an initiative, and at the same time, protecting schools, parks, kids, mm-hmm. and community interests. So what has your focus been through this process, and do you feel that you've been able to address all the major concerns?
I think we've made a lot of progress, and this issue has been brewing for a long time, Peter. As you mentioned, voters passed on a statewide basis the opportunity for medical marijuana 20 years ago. And since then, it's really proceeded with fits and starts, including here in Marin. We had the first dispensary in the nation, believe it or not, in Fairfax. It then got shut down by the feds. There have been a couple of others. Currently, there are no dispensaries in Marin. In fact, they're banned mm-hmm. in every jurisdiction. So we felt it was time at the county level to revisit this issue. So it has been something I've been working hard on. We had an initial hearing a couple months ago. Over 250 people showed up. So a lot of community interest. Mm-hmm. We just had a second hearing. We're continuing to work on an ordinance, and I think we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Fairfax. Lynette Shaw ran the Marin Alliance for Medical Marijuana there for about 14 years. It closed in 2011 because the feds shut it down. Mm-hmm. Recently there was a federal ruling, however, which blocked the Justice Department from enforcing that because it conflicts with a state law.
That's right.
That's brewing on a federal basis. You're a lawyer, you're a former Deputy Attorney General in the state of California. How does that new law affect what you guys are planning for California? For Marin County.
Yeah, our timing is really good, and in a way we are in a completely new environment now. A lot of the concern over the last several years has been for the feds swooping in, potentially targeting these shops, and we saw that in Lynette's case. This federal ruling is important. It recognizes if state law permits medical cannabis, and there is a state scheme of compliance, that the feds cannot come in and shut it down. I think that gives folks comfort. At the same time, as you both, I'm sure know, the governor just signed a comprehensive set of laws on medical cannabis from so-called seed to sale. So it deals with everything from cultivation to dispensaries to testing.
And that was written by our state senator, Mike McGuire.
He was one of three principal authors. There's actually three bills that make up the law. And together, it was long overdue. And I think, again, what we're going to see in Marin is through our local efforts, we're kind of creating a glide path where we are ahead of the curve on the state laws. Ultimately, the state laws still allow local control. The local jurisdiction still has to decide, hey, this is something we want to do. And here, I think there is a real sentiment. Let's give patients safe access. Let's bring it above board and do the right regulations where we're protecting neighborhoods, we're creating the buffer for schools and youth-oriented facilities and other necessary regulations.
So, Damon, Lieutenant Governor Newsom has been working a set of hearings that he's conducted statewide, getting input for an initiative that is expected to be on the ballot in November of 16. And this would be full legalization of marijuana with a lot of structure. It's not just California is a party state. It does have meaningful regulation to attempt to structure it in a sensible way. Have you looked at his proposal, and how does that integrate with the ordinance that you are drafting for medical marijuana in Marin County?
Well, of course, the issues are related but also different. I think where his initiative would go would be full-scale legalization on a recreational basis, so Colorado, Washington State. California looked at that issue a couple years ago with Prop 19. I voted for that. That's kind of how I come down on the issue. And I believe Marin County voters were over 60% in favor. As we know, it ultimately did not pass statewide. However, it looks like it's going to be teed up again next year, and most people expect that it could pass. I think with the recent state regulations around medical cannabis, it provides a framework of regulation that could also facilitate a movement toward full legalization. As part of that, going back to your point, Larry, I think the feds do need to change marijuana from a Schedule I substance akin to heroin and meth to a Schedule II that can be regulated.
Yeah.
Marin, you can't talk about it without looking at a couple of the biggest issues that face us every day: traffic, housing shortages, and raising rents. In September, the Board of Supervisors held a special session about housing. They heard from your staff a report that many moderate and low-income residents are being squeezed out of the county. I think it's obvious. Right. And what surprised me, that only about half the county's workforce can afford to live here. What is your plan to address those problems?
It's a huge issue, and it's something I've been very focused on in my time as a supervisor so far. I was very glad that we had an opportunity to have an initial hearing, public hearing, on issues relating to how can we maintain and preserve the affordable housing that we have in the county. And I think it's going to be just the beginning of the conversation. You know, we were talking about how many times I've been on the show. We've talked about this issue over time, and I think we have a strong sense in Marin of what many people do not favor in terms of solutions. It's really time now, what are we for as a community here in Marin? And the good news is there are a lot of creative ideas coming forward. We have heard about these concepts called junior second units. I think one of the big demographic issues in Marin is our senior population. We're the oldest per capita county in the whole state, and that's only increasing. A lot of seniors are living 3-4 bedroom homes, one person. they have every right to, and part of it could be aging in place, but let's give them some other opportunities, some senior housing, range of incomes, or give them the opportunity to have other people live in their homes, the junior second unit concept and other forms of second units. Another area we're looking at in terms of the issue of increasing rents is the Section 8 program. And I think that can play a key role in maintaining affordability. I'm looking at some other issues about financing options. How do we incentivize landlords who might otherwise be concerned about, let's say, damage or the security deposit, creating some sort of insurance pool almost where it facilitates them saying yes to Section 8.
And that would be a county-wide service?
It would be.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I was there for the session, and there were a couple of really interesting takeaways. But I want to underscore what you said a moment ago that I think is really critical, that it's time for people to come together and work on solutions that are acceptable to those who have, honest disagreements or objections to affordable housing in their own community, the impact on schools and other infrastructure. But it was really stunning to hear the impact of rising rents on people who want to live and work in Marin. It results in 60,000 car trips a day on mostly 101, but the congestion is also fanning out to the feeder routes, the horizontal roads that merge into 101. So this is becoming, a very serious problem across the whole county. The other thing that was new to me was that there were quite a few people from West Marin who spoke in the public comment period about short-term rentals and how they're displacing long-term residents. And one woman said that in her neighborhood of about 16 homes, it's now become a kind of Airbnb ghost town. Mm-hmm. She's the only full-time resident in a neighborhood where there used to be plenty of neighbors. So are you ready to take action on short-term rentals? This is very controversial. San Francisco is reviewing this on the ballot this November. And would you support any kind of regulation to protect renters?
I think the issue is teed up where we are going to have to weigh in on that. I was also very surprised to hear the extent of the issue in West Marin, most notably. On one hand, obviously Airbnb is a creative new business. It's creating flexibility for folks. On the other hand, it is having implications for housing. And so I look forward to working with my colleagues on addressing some issues surrounding that.
Mm-hmm. Now, rent control, has lots of pluses and minuses. Do you see anything that fits Marin's housing stock and that would not be, an extreme impediment on the landowners, the landlords, but that would give greater protection to renters from frequent rent increases, from huge rent increases, or from eviction with very short notice?
So we are not prepared to go forward with rent control itself. However, there are a lot of other options we're looking at. For example, just cause evictions. In Marin County, there actually is a group of landlords, because they see the value of long-term tenancies, even in these hot times, that they're looking at ways of furthering a code of ethics that would say, basically you cannot raise rent beyond a certain amount per year, or you have to provide a certain amount of notice before evicting someone. I think that the smart landlords are willing to work with us on some sensible solutions. Again, I'm not convinced the way to do it is for us to impose, but I think working with that community and tenants, we can come up with some resolution.
So this is sort of like a self-regulatory industry practice that permits the industry to regulate itself in lieu of the government stepping in and creating
So how
rules.
how can we incentivize that? How can we further that? How can we work together? The one example of rent control currently is in San Rafael on mobile home parks, which is something I did go to bat for. That was under legal attack. It ultimately went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and San Rafael prevailed. So I think in that case, that's a program worth keeping.
Your campaign against Susan Adams, which resulted in your victory, you talked and were against the Community Service Fund, which you called a slush fund. Despite the reforms that were instituted upon your receiving your new job as supervisor, you still refused to participate in that process. Do you think that's going to be a re-election issue for the three of your colleagues who are running this term? And does it really shortchange some of the worthy nonprofits in Marin that are unable to get the funds because of the stance like yours?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it sounds like I need to bring you up to date.
Yeah, well, please do.
There have been a lot of positive developments there. So I think the earlier reforms you were speaking of was before my time. Okay. And a subsequent grand jury report, I think it was about the third, said, okay, better, but not far enough. It still created the perception of patronage where supervisors themselves could direct grants. We've actually completely reformed the process, and I was happy to take the lead on that with Supervisor Katie Rice, where it's now a completely transparent process. It's a competitive grant application process with standards that are published. Groups apply. It comes through our county administrator, and then twice a year the supervisors have a hearing and decide in a public forum who gets the grant. So we still have the worthy groups that can apply. They're no longer directed by individual supervisors, and it's an open, transparent process.
Damon Connolly, Marin County Supervisor, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Joe O'Herir joins us now. He's the CEO of Whistlestop, which has supported seniors in Marin since 1954. Most of us have seen the Whistlestop vans that provide transportation for seniors and people with special needs. Whistlestop's Active Aging Center provides affordable meals at Jackson Cafe and for home delivery. They have educational classes, multicultural gatherings, information and referral services. Joe oversees about 175 employees and many volunteers who serve about 7,500 members in Marin. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Peter.
Is all that accurate?
It is, very accurate.
Wow, you're a busy guy.
It is, but I love my job because I get to spend my day with seniors who are just the treasure of our community.
Give us a profile of the senior population in Marin. Baby boomers like me are moving into the senior category,
right.
And our demographics are shifting here in the county.
Right, they are, and in fact, Marin County is the oldest county in the state of California. And we have 1 in 4 people over the age of 60, and by 2035, people over 60 will represent almost 50% of the population in Marin. So obviously we have a growth in demand for those particular services that you mentioned, Peter. And as you said, we've been doing it for 60 years. And what's very interesting is that what the needs of seniors in Marin 60 years ago are still the same ones today, except we have a magnitude of the number that need those services. And as you mentioned, primarily transportation. It's always been a challenge for seniors in a suburban area like we are to be able to get to and access basic services. And so transportation is the largest, followed by nutrition. Nutrition, a daily meal for a senior is very, very critical in keeping them active and engaged in the community. And that's followed by social connection. Seniors, like all of us, want to be connected in the community. They don't want to be isolated. They don't want to be lonely. So those are really the pillars of what we've been doing and what we continue to see. We have a natural growth market, and what Whistlestop and other nonprofits in Marin serving seniors face. And you can see they call it the silver tsunami, which is we boomers who will eventually need these types of services. So it's a growing demand.
So Whistlestop has unveiled plans to build a new center in San Rafael called the Whistlestop Mission Plaza. That's going to be housing for seniors. You're way along in your planning. You've taken it to San Rafael based on criticisms and feedback from the San Rafael City Council. It's been scaled back, and you're planning on about 40 affordable units. Where does that project stand now, and where is it going?
Larry, it's right now in the formal application process. We've submitted a formal application to the City of San Rafael, and that was based upon about 6 months of review and input from the Planning Commission, the Design Review Board, and the public. We held several public meetings and neighborhood meetings, and we've really listened to the community. So this formal application that we submitted 2 months ago really addresses about 90% of the suggestions and requests that we got from the community and the city staff and the Design Review Board and Planning Commission. So now we're in the formal application process, which should take place through about the end of spring or summer of next year. And if we get approval, then we would move to financing and construction, and that would take 2 years from that point out. So we've got a ways to go, but we're encouraged. The majority of public that has seen our new design really feel very good about it. We've had very good reaction and support from the public, so we're encouraged from where we are at this point.
And you're in a pretty visible spot. You're right next to where the SMART train is going to have its downtown platform in San Rafael. You were indicating before you have a much more public plaza and less units. Is that
right?
Some of the modifications that you've made?
Yes. For those who recall, we had sort of a larger massed building with more units, but we listened, and the 4th Street side of our building we've done with setbacks and created a public plaza so that both for gathering and for commuters leaving the SMART train, we'll have now an area that they can enter and exit. We'll have our Jackson Cafe there for food and services. And we've just been able to set it back there so that the view down 4th Street, which was one of the original concerns, because that is the sort of the entry area, we think we've addressed what both the city and the community wanted in dealing with what would be changing, a very transit-oriented area.
So Joe, we have a critical housing shortage, and Supervisor Connolly was talking about that in our preceding segment. But the critical need is for affordable housing units for seniors, and in the past 20 years, only about 500 affordable units overall have been built across the county. Now, you're planning 41 affordable units. That helps. But are you aware of any other projects that are in the design phase or ready for construction that would add to the housing inventory, particularly for seniors, on the affordable basis?
I know there are several projects, Peter, in the works. I think ours is the one that's sort of the most in development, because we obviously have had to develop our area because of the impending arrival of the SMART train, and we're right next to the SMART platform. So even though we only have 40 units, we certainly know the demand is large. I mean, I think the Marin Housing Authority has over 650 seniors on a waiting list for affordable housing, and we certainly see that from our constituents every day. They love spending the day with us, but then they go home to an apartment or a house where they're alone. And the other challenge they have is the cost of housing and the cost of living in Marin. It affects seniors, and they're really, as they are called many times, the hidden poor. In Marin, you need about $30,000 a year to live as a senior for your basic needs: housing, transportation, food. And most of them have around an average fixed income of about $12,000 a year. So, and they don't qualify for federal or government support because they're above the poverty level. So what this is really creating is a large bubble of need in the area of senior housing and affordable housing, and that's why we have added housing and partnering with Eden Housing to bring this in. So the demand is huge. I think it's a challenge, as many know, to get projects through in Marin. Fortunately, Eden Housing, who's our partner, has a project in Novato called Warner Creek, where they have 60 units. And they also run the Fireside Motel, which is a HUD housing project. So they're a nonprofit housing developer who is willing to come in and partner with organizations like Whistlestop to just begin to, really address the challenge that we're seeing.
Last October, just a couple weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors held a housing workshop. Leslie Clore from your agency was there, and she mentioned the home share program.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's hopefully an idea and a concept that's growing around the country, but also has possibilities in Marin. And Leslie works for an organization called Episcopal Senior Communities, which we partner with, and Leslie works with us at Whistlestop, and she handles hundreds of calls. But the shared housing, and there was an article in the Marin IJ this past week, is really called the Golden Girls concept, for those who remember that show, which was, could a group of individuals, seniors, in this case women, live together, which would therefore almost in a dormitory type fashion and sharing a house. And that's what Leslie and many experts are trying to introduce, that concept, because we do have certainly a lot of seniors living in houses that they've owned and they're house rich but maybe cash poor. If they can find a roommate, which is the challenge is the match, and that's what the article talked about, could they start to help each other out by co-housing and co-living together? And therefore, that's not only dealing with their economics, but it's dealing with their loneliness and isolation. So the Golden Girls concept, as it's called, we're hoping, and Leslie has been a real advocate for that in Marin, would help maybe also address, rather than building new, take what we've got and help seniors be able to still live and thrive in this community.
So if you are watching and you have a room available in your house, or you're a senior who is interested in that, you can contact Leslie Clore at Whistlestop.
Right.
Joe, give us a quick sketch. What is your annual budget and where do you get your funding?
Well, we're a fairly large nonprofit. We have, we're probably about $10 million. And the majority of that is in our transportation services. We run that as what's called a nonprofit social enterprise. And we're contracted with Marin Transit and Golden Gate Transit to provide what's called paratransit services, which is an Americans with Disabilities Act law that says every public transit agency must provide a shadow service for the public that cannot access public transportation. And they pay us to provide that service because they run the large fixed buses. And it's a real highly specialized type service we offer. And there are other nonprofits that need to get their clients to their agencies. And rather than them trying to do the transportation, we do it on an economy of skill and scale. And that generates about $8 to $9 million of our revenue. We also receive funding from the Marin Community Foundation and other foundations, and also from the generosity of private donors in Marin.
Give us a quick rundown of some of the other services you provide to seniors and how seniors might connect with you to take advantage of that.
And we have about 30 seconds.
Okay, great.
He always says that.
It's, well, I mean, the best thing is to go to our website, whistlestop.org. We have and we've got people there, and that people can help find out what we offer. We offer everything. We're sort of the United Nations and the surrogate family for seniors in Marin that don't have the typical family support that they would get in another community. That's our job, and that's what we love to do.
And you got a good business going there. I'm sure lots of people making requests.
Yes, very much so. I mean, we're in a natural growth market, as we say, and as I said, we really enjoy helping these seniors who are a treasure of our community.
Joe O'Herir from Whistlestop, whistlestop.org. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you for having me.